Okay, so get this.
Okay.
Picture a packed stadium, the roar of the crowd, that electric atmosphere right before a big football match.
Yeah.
Now imagine that, but silence.
Oh.
A chilling silence as news spreads through the stands that a powerful figure within the Ultras has been gunned down just hours before kickoff, execution style.
Wow.
That's the world we're diving into today. You could say the murky, often violent criminal underworld of Milan's Ultras.
Okay.
We're talking about groups like Inter Milan's Curva Nord and AC Milan's Curva Sud, hardcore fan groups known for their, intense loyalty.
Right.
And let's face it, their history of violence. But what you might not know is how deeply this violence intertwines with organized crime, and that's what we're going to be looking at. Our mission in this deep dive is to trace that connection. We're peeling back the layers to reveal how these groups went from, I don't know, street brawls to like alleged involvement in drug trafficking, extortion, and even murder,
Right.
all under the guise of football fandom. You might remember the tragic death of Daniele Bellardinelli at that Inter-Napoli game back in 2018.
Yeah.
100 Inter-Ultras, some armed with knives and iron bars, ambushed Napoli fans. It turned into a full-blown riot, and Bellardinelli, an Inter fan himself, was killed.
What's crucial to understand here is that this wasn't just a one-off clash between rival fans.
Right.
It exposed a much darker side to these groups, one that had been simmering beneath the surface for years.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Inter. Remember Enzo Anganelli, a known Milan Ultra with
Yeah.
ties to drug trafficking?
Yeah.
A year later, he's ambushed in broad daylight, two guys on a scooter, multiple shots fired. He barely survives. But it really brought to light the potential depth of criminal activity within these ultra groups.
Yeah.
And then right into this volatile landscape steps Vittorio Boiocchi, nicknamed Zio, or Uncle. Now, this wasn't just some old-school ultra coming back to relive his glory days.
Mhm.
This was a hardened ex-con who essentially seized control of Inter's Curva Nord.
And he wasn't subtle about it. Boyocchi engaged in very public power struggles with former leaders, even going so far as to reportedly threaten Inter officials over tickets and stadium access. He was a whole different breed.
So we've got this backdrop of violence and simmering tensions. Then, as if things couldn't get any wilder, a photo surfaces that sends shockwaves through Italy. It shows Luca Lucci, leader of AC Milan's Ultras, fresh out of prison on drug charges, shaking hands with none other than then Interior Minister Matteo Salvini.
That photo, regardless of Salvini's intentions, had huge implications.
Yeah.
It raised serious questions about potential political cover for these groups, or at the very least, a blind eye being turned to their activities.
Right.
It fueled this perception that the Ultras were operating with a level of impunity that was, frankly, alarming.
Okay, so we've got Inter's Curva Nord under the thumb of an ex-con,
Yeah.
AC Milan's Ultras embroiled in a political scandal.
Right.
And then the pandemic hits. You'd think it might have calmed things down,
All right.
but ironically, it had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
With games canceled, stadiums empty, these groups lost their main source of income, ticket scalping, merchandise, you name it.
Exactly. And this is where things take a fascinating turn. Think about it.
Yeah.
These groups thrive on chaos, on the energy of the crowds, on that sense of being above the law. The pandemic took that away. But it also created a void, an opportunity for someone like Boyocchi to consolidate his power.
So he used that period to tighten his grip on the Curva Nord, turning it into his personal, what's the word?
Fiefdom.
Yeah, fiefdom. But it couldn't last forever, right?
No, it couldn't. And it all came crashing down in October 2022. Imagine this.
Okay.
A crisp autumn evening in Milan, the San Siro stadium buzzing with anticipation. And then just hours before Inter's match, the news hits, Vittorio Boiocchi gunned down outside his apartment building.
Execution-style hit. A powerful message.
All right. Absolutely. This wasn't just another mob hit.
Right.
It was a brazen assassination that sent shockwaves through the city and beyond. It demonstrated that the criminal underworld had truly seeped into the heart of these ultra groups.
And what happened within the Curva Nord after Boyocchi's death?
Well, a new leadership emerged, claiming they would usher in a new era for the group, an era of legitimate business dealings, distancing themselves from the mafia ties that had become so glaringly obvious.
And those leading this new era were...
Two figures took center stage. Andrea Beretta, known for his ruthlessness,
Okay.
and Marco Furtico, the media-savvy one, skilled at shaping public perception.
A classic good cop, bad cop routine.
Perhaps. But remember, at the same time, we see the rise of Antonio Bellocco within the Inter Ultras. And this wasn't just any ultra. Bolocco was the nephew of a powerful 'Ndrangheta boss. Now, for those who don't know, the 'Ndrangheta is one of the most powerful and feared mafia groups in the world, originating in the Calabria region of Italy.
So while Beretta and Fertico were promising a clean break from the past, the 'Ndrangheta was potentially tightening its grip on the Curva Nord.
Precisely. And wouldn't you know, reports of extortion, drug trafficking, all those legitimate business ventures, they started to skyrocket around this time.
Yeah.
It makes you question just how sincere those promises of a new era really were.
Okay, so we've got this fascinating contradiction. A supposed cleanup within the Curva Nord coinciding with the 'Ndrangheta's growing influence. What about AC Milan's ultras? Were they sticking to the straight and narrow?
Not quite. Remember Federico Di Marco, the Inter player who used to be an ultra himself?
Yeah.
Well, during a goal celebration, he reignited an old feud with AC Milan's ultras by chanting a particularly offensive song. Threats were exchanged, tensions flared. It was all very dramatic.
And I'm guessing this wasn't just some spontaneous outburst of rivalry.
Exactly, because then, almost like a scripted play, we get this seemingly staged apology, brokered by none other than Marco Fertico, the media-savvy leader of the reformed Curva Nord.
So they wanted to create the illusion of this bitter rivalry while potentially working together behind the scenes.
It's a classic tactic. Maintain the facade of conflict while pursuing shared interests, often criminal in nature. And AC Milan's ultras, under Luca Lucci's leadership, were far from innocent themselves.
What kind of activities were they involved in?
Well, around this time, a string of violent incidents implicated prominent members of AC Milan's Curva Sud. We're talking about the brutal assault of a personal trainer over an alleged social media dispute, the beating of a fan for wearing a non-official Curva Sud shirt, even a drug-related attack outside of Milan.
It seems like those claims of a new, nonviolent era within the ultras were, shall we say, a bit premature.
To put it mildly, and all of this was just a prelude to the climax of this story, a murder that would expose the true depths of mafia involvement within Milan's ultras.
So the tension is building, the violence is escalating, and then what happened? Give us the climax of this whole story.
It all comes to a head in September of 2024 with a murder that shakes the foundations of these ultras. Remember Antonio Bolocco, the Ndrangheta heir we talked about?
Yeah.
He's found stabbed to death.
And they arrested.
Andrea Beretta.
Wow.
The very man who promised a new era for Inter's ultras.
Right.
Turns out those promises were about as empty as the San Siro on a non-match day.
Wow. So what's the story? What was the motive?
Beretta's confession blew the whole thing wide open. He revealed a three-way profit split. Him, Fertico, and Bolocco all profiting from the Curva Nord's activities. But Bolocco, backed by the 'Ndrangheta's vast resources, got greedy, demanding a larger cut. Beretta, feeling the pressure, decided to take drastic measures.
So this wasn't just a rivalry between ultras. It was a power struggle within a criminal enterprise masquerading as a fan group.
Precisely. And this murder, as shocking as it was, it peeled back the facade and exposed the ugly truth that had been lurking beneath the surface all along.
Yeah. It's incredible how these groups operated so openly for so long. It makes you wonder, how did they manage to evade scrutiny for so long?
Well, I think part of it is the sheer volume of people involved. These ultras command thousands of members, making it difficult to distinguish genuine fans from those engaged in criminal activity. And let's not forget the inherent difficulty in prosecuting organized crime, especially groups as entrenched and powerful as the 'Ndrangheta.
And the political connections we talked about earlier probably didn't hurt either.
Exactly. Whether it was intentional collusion or simply turning a blind eye, those connections undoubtedly created an environment where these groups felt untouchable.
So what does this all mean? What's the takeaway for someone listening to this, trying to make sense of it all?
I think this deep dive has revealed, the unsettling reality of how deeply intertwined sports, crime, and even politics can become. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the allure of easy money, and the dark side of passionate fandom.
Yeah, it makes you think twice about those chanting crowds at a football match, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It makes you wonder, what else lurks beneath the surface? What other stories haven't been told?
Exactly.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.